Coming up next here on Locked On Sooners, we're going to talk about some NIL changes coming in other states. Could they come to Oklahoma, and how would that matter? We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers. The college football landscape is constantly changing, constantly evolving. We got revenue sharing that's going to be coming down the line at some point. We'll discuss some proposals that we're seeing along SEC lines that might impact Oklahoma probably a little bit later this week. But there's one change that is being proposed in Louisiana that could have an impact on Oklahoma down the road. A Louisiana lawmaker is proposing a bill that would remove NIL funds from being required to pay state income tax.
Yep.
Now, why that would matter? Similarly to what you see in professional sports, where agents and teams try to use states like Texas and Florida and their lack of income tax as a perk for luring a player to those franchises. Oklahoma has a state income tax currently. Governor Kevin Stitt, I think I saw recently on social media that he is attempting to move to removing state income tax from Oklahomans and them not having to pay it. So that could be something that we see down the road anyway from Oklahoma without it having to be NIL related.
Yeah, and it's very fascinating too. It kind of goes back to the initial NIL conversation that a lot of people have had. The biggest concern they have for these young players is, how are they going to cover their taxes? What are they going to be able to do with that? And I've said this numerous times. The one thing that I expect from a coaching staff that walks into a home and tells the parents that they are leaders of men and their goal is to help their child be a great, contributor to society, and while also teaching them life lessons and stuff on the football field and being, the best football player possible, that these coaches would find a way to make sure that they've got the best accountants, the best lawyers, and best all of that. Because if you're a leader of men, that's kind of one of the things you would lead with as well, being fiscally responsible while also, taking care of business on and off the field. So I would expect that the organization would have that stuff in line to help prepare that kind of stuff, right? I mean, at least that's my thought process on it. This is another example of people love their sports, John. Mm-hmm. Like school, states, fans, they love their sports. And because of that, they're going to find any way, shape, or form to get an advantage. And in the article for Louisiana talking about it, their biggest thing is that Georgia's doing it, Alabama's doing it, Illinois is doing it, and we're going to be competing with them for athletes because those are hotbeds of athletes, like Atlanta area. Alabama's got a ton of talent, mainly because of being so close to Georgia and Florida. Illinois having the Chicago Metro and all of that. They've got talent that these schools want. So Louisiana's like, no, we're not going to put ourselves in a situation that's going to be in a disadvantage. And so I expect that in order for a lot of these schools to want to compete, they're going to find a way to make sure that these kids can keep as much money in their pockets as possible. So the fear of them in taxes, John, kind of misplaced. People are going to find a way to make sure these kids are successful. Now, they're going to make stupid decisions, but everyone's allowed to do that. I was allowed to do it. You were allowed to do it. Everybody's allowed to make a stupid decision. I think that they should be afforded that opportunity as well, while at the same time understanding that states are going to find a way to get themselves a competitive advantage as possible.
Yeah, it seems like it's a domino effect. Once one state does it, then it becomes a thing around the country. I think Texas, Florida, they've got a little bit of that advantage already in place because there's no state income tax. And so if you're Oklahoma, for example, you want to be in a position where you can tell your athletes in Texas, hey, if you come to Oklahoma, that's not going to be an issue. You're not going to have to pay state income tax. It's not going to be a thing that you have to worry about. Same for when you're recruiting down in Florida. You love to recruit Florida, Brent Venables, Todd Bates, Miguel Chavis. You want to get down there. You want to recruit those kids to Oklahoma. It's the same thing. So it's going to be a domino effect. At some point, it'll take effect here in Oklahoma because they've tried to respond in a similar way, allowing businesses to write off NIL donations, or they've made changes that have happened across the NIL landscape. And absent of anything happening at the federal level with name, image, and likeness, it's up to the states basically to decide how this is all going to run, because the NCAA is not going to get their hands in it. They don't want to mess with any of this, especially as the House settlement is still being worked on and still working to an official agreement. They don't want to have any part of it. So it's going to be up to the states to basically decide their own NIL legislation.
Yeah, and we know that that's going to happen until the settlement comes in, and all of these stuff, their plan is to put these in place before that settlement comes through, while at the same time, because I know Oklahoma made it to where they can start, compensating players a little bit earlier, sometime last year. That's kind of a bill that's coming down the line. And so we understand that every state is trying to find a competitive advantage for their state schools to be able to compete in NIL. And so once House settlement comes down, which probably won't be until like late April, early May, because, as judges are really thumbing through this, they're understanding some of the, ridiculousness that are being asked, and I guess the quote unquote injustices that are being thrown out there. So I don't expect any of this stuff to settle very soon. And just like you said, NCAA ain't going to help nobody. NCAA doesn't want to have anything to do with this. They're pretty terrible when it comes to, man, they could have had this fixed a long time ago. They could have had this all set up with no problem. But the thing is that if the NCAA had fixed it, then they would have to admit fault or admit they were at fault and did everybody dirty with antitrust all the way back, to the inception of collegiate sports. So I get where their position is that, yeah, we don't want to look like we got egg on our face because we were wrong. But at the same time, thinking that the federal government's going to do anything to help the actual NCAA without realizing that every single rep in there is going to be trying to find a way to take care of their own state, stuff's going to get a little murky. And so it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time for all this to wash over. Right now, it's Wild Wild West. Yes, I understand people don't like that. But I still don't understand the blame on the kids for any of this, because they're just playing with the rules and parameters that have been placed in front of them. These are adults trying to find ways to keep money into their pockets, or keep money in the pocket of the organizations. When in all actuality, if they would just, admit fault and just take care of these kids from the beginning, we wouldn't be talking about it. Then we wouldn't be having all of these ridiculous NIL conversations.
Yeah, it's one of those, we're just kind of playing catch up now.
Yep.
Universities, networks have made billions off of the backs of athletes for decades, for a millennia. And now everybody's playing catch up and trying to figure out how to make this all work in a way that creates competitive balance and is legit, because there's still some questions as to really what is NIL, what is name, image, and likeness. And, through the collectives, through individual donors, it's a very broad definition what we're seeing. And we're not necessarily seeing NIL in the spirit of what NIL might have supposed to be. Like, this is like, hey, Terrell Pryor, you want to go get tattoos and you want to promote that tattoo parlor for giving you free tattoos? Okay, you want to trade merchandise for tattoos? That's well within your right to do that. Like, this is trying to erase some of that stuff. Rhett Bomar, you want to go and be on salary with an auto dealer and then, bump them on social media. Okay, Rhett Bomar, you can go do that and not have to get kicked off of the team because of it. So this is like erasing some of the wrongs of the past, where it's like, this should be basic. Or if, John Mateer wants to do an autograph signing and charge a little bit of money for it, who does that hurt? It hurts nobody. But yeah, I think we're still wading through, like you said, the murky waters of NIL, and there's going to be some more evolution that comes out of it, because we're not by any stretch of the imagination close to a final resolution on what NIL is supposed to look like. And apparently we're not close to a final resolution on the future of Porter Moser with the Oklahoma men's basketball team. Let's discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.